Hey, what's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to Fable Forge. Today I got a collection of nice, true, scary stories from r/askreddit, and I always really like the scary stories because they're true ones. But these are the perfect video to fall asleep to, study, or if you just want to get a little chill down your spine. But please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the narration and would like to see more. I'm planning to grow the channel and I could really use all the help I can get. But without further ado, enjoy. R slash ask Reddit. What's the scariest true story you know? Story 1. I grew up in a funeral home. I helped out in the office. When I was about 15, we got a call from a man whose wife and infant baby had been murdered in cold blood. There were very few clues. It made headlines. Cops set up surveillance at the viewing. It was heartbreaking as the mother was holding the baby in the arms. I was asked to take the flower cards and periodically get the husband and ask if he recognized the names. I then photocopied them and put them back. I did it because I was a kid. People knew me, and I was unobtrusive. I talked to the husband quite a bit. He seemed devastated and shaken. The cops told me they had an eyewitness to someone leaving the house the day of the murder. The witness was a 3-year-old girl. She recognized the man leaving. It was the husband's best friend. Turns out that the friend and the husband had made a pact to kill each other's families and run off with their secretaries. The little girl identified the friend, and I guess one of them cracked. They both went to jail on multiple counts, all on the testimony of a 3-year-old girl. I still cannot believe, to this day, that man stood right beside me multiple times, and I had no clue. I don't think I ever looked at life the same after that. Story 2. My great aunt woke up in the middle of the night. She heard her dog making these low growls. She was single at the time and living alone in her ranch style home. She walked out to her living room to check things out. She didn't see or hear anything out of the ordinary, so she decided to make sure her front door and windows were locked. Door was locked. First window she checked was locked. When she lifted the mini blind on the second window, it was wide open, and a guy in a ski mask was standing there. She said he laughed this evil laugh and said, "Party time!" Then he started to climb in. She screamed that she had a gun, and her dog started barking his head off. The would-be rapist decided to bolt. My aunt did get a gun after that and learn how to use it. I can't even think about what would have happened to her if she didn't have her dog to warn her. Story 3. James Bulger. He was just 2 years old and with his mom running errands. She let go of his hands to pay for the cashier and he wandered away. Two 10-year-old boys spotted him, lured him towards them, took him by the hand, and led him away. They took him to a remote location, pushing and kicking him the whole time. Some people questioned the two kids with the crying toddler, but they lied in saying he was their brother and nobody intervened further. They took him to a secluded spot and tortured him. I don't want to recount the torture details, it's just too gruesome. They left his body on the railroad tracks, hoping that it'd be run over by a train and would make it look like an accident. He was found days later, his body severed in half by a train. The boys were caught and became the youngest convicted murderers in British history. Security footage from the day they took James shows them watching children, picking out a target, and they were just kids themselves. They were released at 18. One of them is back in jail for possessing child abuse photos on his computer. The most terrifying thing about all this for me is that my own son is only 2 now, and James's murderers were just children too. It was a premeditated and intentional and entirely random. Just a momentary lapse in attention, and he became the target of 2 murderous children. Children. To think that children younger than my stepson are capable of such a thing, ugh. Everything about this case is just horrifying. Story 5. Danguoli Rosaleti was a Lithuanian girl who was sold as a sex slave in Sweden in late 1999. Her mother had abandoned her when she was 14 years old and left to the USA. When she was about 15 to 16 years old, she was sent from Lithuania by an older man who had pretended to be her boyfriend. He promised her a job as a berry picker in Sweden and gave her a fake passport. When she arrived in Sweden, a man welcomed her and locked her in an apartment in Malmo. He said he had to pay him 20,000 kronor for her passport and the transportation from Lithuania to Sweden. She soon understood she would be working as a prostitute. Razalate was forced to work as a prostitute for 2 weeks before she escaped the apartment she was imprisoned in. On January 7, 2000, she jumped off a bridge in Malmo after escaping the apartment and getting raped by a group of men who pretended they would help her. She died 3 days later in a hospital. Her case stirred much debate on human trafficking. Story 6. I had a guy tell me a story a couple decades ago about how he was hiking in an area in South America and wandered away from the other hikers in the area. The ground was wet, and without warning, it gave way, and he was sucked into a fast moving underground river, pitch black, completely submerged, and at the mercy of the current as it buffeted him against the sides of the tunnel. After some time, the current subsided, and he realized he was in a larger pocket, still black and submerged. He said that even as he was struggling to hold his breath, he didn't panic and realized that the water had to keep moving somewhere, so he moved around until he found another tunnel that sucked him in. At one point, he began to see light, so he punched upwards, broke through the ground, and pulled himself out, soaking wet, grasping for air, and a bit of distance from the other dry hikers, who were somewhat bewildered when they saw him strangling up to them. Story 7. I served a short stint as a fireman. There was an RTA call one morning, 30 minutes after I started my shift. This guy got T-boned while driving home from work after a heavy night of drinking. He got T-boned on the passenger side when he ran at red light. His wife died instantly, and he pretty much remained unharmed. When we arrived at the scene, he was out of his car while the wife was still seated in the passenger seat. Her lower body was still in the seat while her upper torso was splayed over the driver's side. Looks like she was just reaching over to the driver's side to open the door, just that she was unconscious and non-reactive. No blood at all from what we can see from the driver's side, and the passenger's door was caved in badly. The driver was still tipsy and thought nothing of what's happening, kept asking us to hurry up and extract his wife so they could head back home, laughing and fumbling around with the police. When the paramedics realized that there was no pulse, we tried extracting her from the driver's side, and we realized that her lower left body, her pelvis to her thigh, was completely crushed, and she was impaled through her left abdomen by a piece of the door. When we told him that his wife died, probably bled out minutes after impact, you could see the disbelief. Stop kidding me. Slowly morphing into realization, then ending up as desperation. He was immediately sober and ran over to the driver's side, tried to pull his wife out. It tore her wound up, and we had to drag him out. He then proceeded to the passenger side and tried to pry open the cave door open. We left the scene and let the police handle the aftermath. Saw it on the news that afternoon. Story 8. The New London School Explosion. A school in Texas in 1937 tried to tap into a natural gas on their own, and it ended up leaking and blowing up the whole school. It's the reason they make natural gas scented in Texas and probably in the US now. I'm amazed I never heard of this in school because it seems like something that should be taught. I read some survivor stories and I had fucking nightmares. It was horrible. 3 in particular stuck with me. One was a 7 or 8-year-old girl. She saw her best friend and playmate with her entire body crushed by concrete, with only her shoulders and head above it, and she still had a lollipop in her mouth, like she didn't know what happened. Another was a guy, I think 16, 17-year-old, helping undig people and bring them out of the wreckage. He saw a dad holding his daughter, crying his eyes out, while the back of the girl's head was broken open, with her brain on the ground next to her. The last was a 9-year-old-ish girl who went to find her mom after it happened. There was a PTA meeting going on at the time, so there was a lot of parents at the scene. Her mom was freaking out, trying to find her, but didn't even recognize her. She went up to her mom and called out to her, but she just kept saying, "You're not my daughter." She was so covered in blood and ash and tears that her own mother couldn't even recognize her. Story 9. One of my best friends growing up had an aunt that was the sweetest, most generous woman you could possibly know. She started dating a man that fell in love with her because of how sweet and kind she was. After a month or so of being together, he accused her of being too nice to other people. So he bludgeoned her until she was unconscious and cut her heart out of her chest while she was still alive. He thought that it was the worst example of sheer disrespect that she would exhibit kindness towards other people when she was in a committed relationship. He believed he owned all of the good she had to give, and by being nice to people that weren't him, she may as well been cheating with him with the whole town. He killed her for being the person he knew her to be when they started dating. The fact that people exist like him is terrifying. Story 10. I lived next to a murderer. Faye Sweatlick was 6 years old when she was kidnapped out of her front yard. It was all over the news. I had news crews, cops, even the FBI all over my townhouse complex. My fiance and I met with the FBI 3 times. They searched our home and everything. I remember clear as day. My fiance FaceTimed me as the cops were digging through the trash cans directly in front of my townhouse. They pulled out her boot and a bloody knife, then found her body dumped maybe 300 feet from my house. Had watched them find the murder weapon. Dumbass put it in a trash bag along with the other mail. He went back to his porch and opened his own throat. It's crazy. I had conversations with the guy. I never knew he was a psycho. This all happened a year ago. Story 11. The story of Christopher Dunsch, aka Dr. Death, who operated out of Plano and Dallas area. He maimed 33 people and killed 2. He was an alleged neurosurgeon that didn't actually receive a proper medical education to operate, but still did so despite not being fully trained. No hospital would report him or take his license away. They would just pass him off to another hospital to continue injuring or killing people. He was the first doctor to be formally indicted with murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. Story 12. A woman who went to my regular pub was out with her friend during the day, and in the evening she missed a bus home and then ended up in another pub. She was tipsy and ended up going home with a man who lived with another male. They both had an obsession with serial killers and murdered her. And after they chopped her body up, they spent the next week putting her body in plastic bags and hiding them in the bushes, etc. They were caught pretty quickly and thankfully are in prison for life. The day she went missing, I saw her in a pub with her friend and stood in the smoking area with her laughing about a pigeon who was just chilling too. I have a video where she's in it and she makes a joke just hours before her death. I think about her nearly every day. It's something that's sort of traumatizing, and she did not deserve such a cruel ending to her life. Anyways, YouTube, that's all the stories we have for today. I hope y'all enjoyed and it made your day a little bit better and maybe got a little chill down your spine. I certainly did reading some of these. But hey, I'm really trying to grow the channel. Please like and subscribe. Any little bit helps if you want to see more content like this. I'm trying to do it every other day, so trying to keep a consistent schedule. But yeah, I hope y'all have a great week.